hope everybody's having a fantastic whatever day you're watching this. So, going on a little bit early, checking in at about 8:30 Central on this one. We'll probably stick to the earlier schedule moving forward. So, let's dive into it. First of all, point of this show tonight, know your limitations. When you're talking about modifying one of these Mopars, one of the things that I've noticed is that guys tend to try to think a little bit outside of what the reality is going to be when they're trying to modify these cars. And there is a lot of, how should I put this? There's a lot of reality checks that end up coming into play when it comes to the end result when you're modifying a car. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to first go over the 5.7, then the 6.4, then the Hellcat platforms, but I do want to kick it off with this. A little bit of housekeeping, if you will. I am no longer going to be doing any peer reviews, I'm not looking at anybody's tunes anymore. I'm not messing with, folks might send me something, hey, can you look at this? Can you check it out? Help them make changes and moving on from there. I'm not doing that anymore for a few reasons. But let me tell you the reason why. What ends up happening invariably is when I get a tune for a peer review, which is to say somebody's got a tune and they need somebody to take a look at it because something's not going right, the vehicle's not running well, whatever the case is. I go in and I start to take a look at the tune. I dissect it and I compare it with data logs. I go through the tune with my own knowledge just in terms of background, stuff I've seen that I know works, stuff that I also happen to know through a lot of trial and error what doesn't work. and so that ends up being me and my background and my experience being used to try to sort out the tune or whatever. These are tunes that people have spent hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to have put on their cars. Like a shitload of money that these guys have spent to try to get their car to run right, only for it not to run right. I agree to take a look at it and it's like, okay, cool, thanks, man. Peace out. And I end up not getting anything for it. Like, my expertise and my time was just, oh, well, thanks. Like, I owe it to somebody. So, moving forward, there will be no more peer reviews. There's not going to be any more of me going over tunes for guys. None of that. And so, if you've got a specific combination that you need help with, get with the tuner, get with the person that you spent money with, and let them sort it out. Because it ain't going to be me. Okay, so now that pleasantry is out of the way, what I want to do is I want to talk specifically about what are the limitations, what can you and what you cannot get away with, and really where to kind of hit the skids when you're talking about modifying these modern Hemis. So, diving into it, first off, with the 5.7, listen, this is probably my favorite platform of all the different Hemi combinations that are out there. The 5.7 in a lot of ways is a lot more traditional, if you will. The reason why is it doesn't have a almost said multiple displacement. It doesn't, it does have MDS. But no, it doesn't have a variable runner intake manifold. It does have MDS. We're talking about the later cars here. But it's just a bit more of a simple platform. And I like that. But more to that point, I like it because with a sticky tire, you can absolutely get that thing to dead hook on the street. Now, what would be the limitations for that car? Well, displacement. You see, the problem is that these cars are heavy, and as good as the transmissions are, especially with the HP 70 and HP 90, that's for the NA cars, and then the 90s for the Hellcat variants. The thing is that as good as all of that is, the engine just doesn't have the torque to get the thing moving. So if that's the case, then cubic inches is what you're lacking in this. But you can make up for that in a good cam a good transmission tune, obviously a good engine tune to go along with the cam, and a good exhaust system. That's really all that you need to make that 5.7 sing. And to go any further than that, the problem that you'll have is that you will begin to chip away at drivability. Remember, these are street cars. I'm not talking about an all-out race effort. That is a completely different set of circumstances. But if it were my car and if it were my customer, I would probably stop them at cam exhaust, basically an FBO car with a cleaned up stock intake manifold and just a really solid tune, and maybe a gear to go along with this just to make it run good. A 370 is a good compromise gear for that car, and it makes up for the lack of torque by having, well, torque multiplication. So that's really the best bet. That, by the way, is a pretty solid 11-second or low 12-second car, but it would do it on the street, again, with a sticky set of tires. Cam, tune, gear, a little bit of cleanup on the intake manifold. Leave the stock throttle body completely alone. Hellcat airbox with a Hellcat filter. That's really all you need to build a sweet little street combination. Now, you don't have to go cam and you don't have to go gear. There's a lot of stuff you don't have to do. But of all the things that I've mentioned, that's about where I would stop. Now, you could go forced induction, and a lot of guys like to. Stuart, thank you very much. We're working on porting his intake manifold. A man after my own heart. Yes. Make sure that when you are doing it, you are going slowly. Make sure you aren't trying to rush it. Remember that you are working with polymer, and let the tool do the work. Don't put any pressure on it. Let the tool do its thing and check regularly. Stuart, since you did that, let me do this. Let me get you some ideas of what tools I like to use. So you're going to want a set of these. These are snap gauges. What they do is you will set different depths to, if you're working on things, you set the depth, and when you open it up, that'll basically lock itself into that size. So let's say that's the size that you're working with. You twist it, it will hold that size, and that'll allow you to get in there and just make sure that you're even all the way through your runners. Actually, this would not be for your runners. It would be your D tool. And that's the size. Oop, there we go. Need to lube these up. But anyway, it'll go from that size out to that size. And what you'll do is you'll just use this to gauge how thick you are and make sure everything is uniform as you are working. Also, for the throat of that intake, don't go crazy with it. There's absolutely no need to, but this is a 60 grit flat wheel for your drill. You don't necessarily have to go 60 grit. 80 grit is actually pretty good. If you use this, be incredibly careful with it because it generates a lot of heat and you can end up cooking or scalding that polymer. Use it sparingly. Again, with this, do not put a lot of pressure on that thing for fear that you will absolutely cook it. What else? That's it. If you've got a Dremel, you already know what you're doing. So, hopefully that helps you out. Let me put all my stuff back where I found it. There we go. But yeah, the snap gauge is invaluable tool for me. So there you have it. Again, Stuart, hopefully that helps you out, man. Those are the tools that I used. Ported a lot of those intake manifolds. So you're saying, oh, I was wondering about, thank you, been curious about using the right Dremel bit. I use a flat wheel for a throttle body port. Yep, that's right. For the rest of it, you're going to use your 1/4 inch and your 1/2 inch cartridge rolls, I guess, little drums. And I like to use 80 grit for those. But again, be sparing with those. And remember, Mickey Mouse, you do your corners first for your runners, then you do the centers. Don't do the centers and then try to clean up the corners. That's not how it works. Always Mickey Mouse your ports and then go from there. So hopefully that helps you along in your porting journey. Oh, most important thing you can do though, wear your I don't have it here. Wear your mask. Wear your breathing stuff. You do not want to be breathing in that polymer. Make sure you're in a well-ventilated area. If you can, be in your garage with a fan behind you, blowing that stuff outside. And if you can, remember, wear at least some type of spectacles. Very important 2 things. Keep your health in charge. Also, you've already gotten started, but make sure that when you guys, if you're thinking about getting into porting intakes and things like that, cleanliness. Clean. Make sure that thing is clean before you start fooling with it. I can tell you that you will, if you decide you want to do this stuff locally for the guys around you, if you're really deep into it and you're doing it right, it's going to take between 4 and 6 hours per intake manifold. And you need to be charging at least 60, 70 bucks an hour for your time. But the main thing is make sure that it's clean, and you will figure out real quick who's running cold air intakes or not, because the guys that are the insides of those intakes, or the inside of the intake manifolds themselves, especially through the throat, will be covered in dust. It's like a talc. And you'll also see, I'm running a catch can. It doesn't matter. Once you start pulling these things apart, they all have oil in them. So anyway, that's where I would, getting back to my discussion on the 5.7. Boost, okay, fine. We can talk about Boost as a separate entity, but just in terms of what you're going to be doing to that engine and the final outcome, the build that I would say would be just the choicest for the street would be exactly what I was talking about. Small cam, like a 220, 225, or sorry, 220, 228 cam, with like 114 or 113 LSA. That's going to be healthy. A 218, 224 is probably a better bet for the 5.7 with a 112 or a 113 LSA. That would be my personal choice. But stock intake, give it some port, clean it up. Again, the idea when you're working on an intake manifold is you're not porting it per se. You're cleaning it up. You're transitioning. You're making transition smooth. What I would call it, I would say it's blueprinting the intake manifold, making sure that you are getting the flow out of this thing that the engineers would have expected. You'll find that some intakes are super clean. You pulled them off and you wonder why you would even try to put work into them. Others, on the other hand, have a lot of casting flash, and you wonder how these things could ever flow worth a darn to begin with. I've seen all aspects of that. But again, yes, don't go too aggressive. And if you're porting a 6.4 manifold, it's okay to backfill a 6.4 manifold underneath on the underneath side with epoxy before you get started. A lot of guys get real aggressive and they end up punching through. Oh, damn. Nitro, thank you very much. But you got to get paid for your knowledge. You've helped me with my Hellcat starting on suspension and then motor. I refuse to sell it as it's perfect hot rod to me. Thank you, man. Nitro, thank you so much, brother. I appreciate that. Wow. And I'm happy to be able to help. That's the thing. I mean, really generous of you, brother. Thank you so much. The whole point of this channel was to try to help fellow Mopar enthusiasts weed through all of the nonsense and the bullshit that you would see getting thrown our way. There was a lot of manufacturers' claims that were absolutely untrue. There were a lot of shops that were incredibly shady that would promise the moon, but, would make up excuses when, you didn't really get past ass high. And so what I wanted to do is just bring you guys firsthand real world knowledge from a guy that was racing these cars, that was involved in roll racing, a lot of drag racing, chasing numbers, trying to have the fastest variant of whatever we could come up with at that time, whether it was the 392 stuff, which we did own for quite a while, as a matter of fact. oddly enough, didn't really take that too much further than the SRT, but I had plans on building a 10-second stock cam just scat pack. But anyway, that's where all of this comes from. And really, to remind you guys that less is more. Working on bits like suspension, tires, driving technique, learning your vehicle, understanding the ebbs and flows of the platform, yeah, that's worth a tenth or two in some cases. As a matter of fact, that was one of the things that we would pride ourselves on, was just how consistent our driving would be, how fast we could be with really not a whole lot done to these cars. And so that's why I wanted to, when I first got started with the channel, that's why I got started with, or that was the premise that I got started with, was just saying, look, this is why I would do this. This is why I wouldn't do that, whatever the case is. And in this case, we're talking about limitations and modifications. So anyway, let me get back to the 5.7, but yeah, I truly appreciate that, man. Thank you so extremely very much, Nitro, man. That's super cool of you. So getting back to why that 5.7 is, I'm so happy with the 5.7 and why it's what I think one of the best street combinations you can come up with, is because they're durable. You can go boost with that car and stay well within the confines of what would be considered to be safe for the limitations of the HP70 transmission. You got to remember, up to about 530 foot-pounds of torque to the rear wheels, on a Mustang dyno, which is equivalent to, say, around 575 foot-pounds of torque on a dyno jet, that's the happy place, maximum happy place, though, for an HP70 transmission. So that's why I say that's about the limit for that car. You can have a lot of fun with it. You can go cam and put a small blower on it and have a blast with it. And you're not necessarily going to break the bank, especially at this stage of the game. Most of those cars are, all of them are going to be used cars, but most of them, honestly, they kind of don't lead that heavy of a life. A lot of people use them for daily commuters, and just like a pickup truck, I mean, it's a Hemi. My Buffy's got over 200,000 miles on her, and I drive the hell out of it, and I maintain it well, too. But, again, that's why I like the 5.7 so much. So anyway, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to get into chatting with you guys, and we will go from there. Nitro, thank you again, buddy. First in. Got the flex. Thank you, brother. Marco, you like the C5? I love the C5. I had a C5 Z06. My only beef with the C5 are the ergonomics. The steering wheel has a very limited range that it can be adjusted. The seat has an odd limited range. If you're buying one as an automatic, it's a fantastic car. I just don't like it as a manual because I could never get the car sorted ergonomically, but I loved driving the thing. Stuart, what's up? Marco's asking, should I keep the regular cab 6.4 and boost it or grab a C5 that's supercharged? Oh, dang, dude. That's two way different. Oh, wow. It all depends on what you're going to do with it. I'm more of a pickup truck guy, so I would say keep the truck. Put a small, put a D1 with a race intercooler Pro Charger on it and just kind of call it good at that point. The Vet is a cool car, man. Don't get me wrong. I am a recovering 2-time Corvette owner. It all depends, man. If you like the Vet, go with it. Here's the only problem, dude, bro. Okay, look. Shoot. Okay, here we go. I do have one problem with Corvettes. The problem that I have with the Corvette is that if you're making any more than about 440 horse to the rear tires. If it's a manual car, automatic, it doesn't matter. A wide open throttle downshift, especially at highway speeds, you can break loose those tires. The fun I used to have with my Z06 is that I would go sniping after Hellcats. I would go picking on Hellcats for roll racing, and it was just an NA LS6. Okay. I had that car wall hunt on me on regular Tri-5 Nittos. I immediately went to drag radials full time all the time after that. So, yeah, it's a lot of fun. They're a lot of fun. I used to love. I mean, it'll bark forth on the highway. They're a lot of fun. But just know that if you get one, it's not an all-weather car anymore if it's at that power level, and you have to run drag radials on it for safety purposes. You don't necessarily have to do that in the truck, and that's another reason why I like the truck too. Sovereign is in. Stuart, thank you, my friend. I do appreciate that, buddy. And hopefully that, again, that the tools and stuff like that helped. You take your time. I used to enjoy it. It was relaxing for me to port manifolds. Trinket, good stuff. Thank you. Goldfish, I really appreciate your videos. Thank you. Thank you. Should I worry with the fact that Ivan's Performance ICU flash deactivate the O2 sensor for when I ride in the mountains? No, not at all. No. You just doing the flash on the 16 front? No, don't worry about that a bit. Matter of fact, I took my O2 sensor completely out. Just totally removed it. You do not need that sensor for what you will be doing with that bike. It's all map and it's all map based, so don't worry about it. But good question. That's a motorcycle based question, by the way, guys. Very cool question. Arfos, sub Mason, sub chat. What's up, Arfos? Robert Smith, I have a 2010 Challenger RT, 392 cam, 3200 stall, rear gears 1280, 180 60 foot. Would I benefit more with 6.1 manifold or port my 5.7? I would, in this case, okay, so the difference between the two manifolds is real hard to pick because they both flow extremely similarly. I don't know that a 6.1 manifold would be money well spent. It'll help the thing breathe better, I'll tell you that. Bob, what altitude are you at? What is your physical, if you know it, what's your physical altitude, or what density altitude do you typically run your vehicle at? I'm just curious based on the number that you ran. But that being said, let's see, it's a 2010. Oh, it's a 2010. Okay. So you are rocking, that's a Nag 1 car. Man, I don't want to see you spend your money. I would do a cleanup on your 5.7. Make sure that you basically just blueprint that 5.7 manifold. It's very easy to do. Stuart's in the middle of doing his right now. I don't know what your goal is. And so help me out with some more of that information, and then we can retouch that. Nitro, thank you so much again, buddy. I appreciate it. Stuart's saying, yep, my intake manifold had a bunch of grit and oil, even with a catch can. Yes, sir. Rex, do you think these street takeovers are ruining the muscle car industry? Well, this is stuff that's been going on for a long time. When I used to live in Northern California, it was the Sideshow. And that was a bunch of Camaros and Mustangs and GTOs and, stuff like that. This is nothing new, guys. It might be a little bit more readily accessible, but Sideshow stuff has been going on since forever. It's not a good look. I'll put it to you like this. It used to be that we would some individuals. Anyway, you'd blast a couple of donuts through the intersection and check out. I mean, it wasn't some kind of a like organized thing. The problem is it's become more and more organized. And as it becomes more and more organized, it's looking more and more like organized crime. And that's the issue. It's just a lot of the accidents that happen, a lot of people getting hurt at these events, young people doing what young people do best, which is do dumb shit. And this is just a professional grade of being stupid. And look, I understand. I don't hold up. I don't understand the mentality to literally try to do something like that. That all that is for is to post videos and get clicks. But there's no money in it, there's no upside, and if somebody gets seriously hurt, injured, or killed in the process of this, it's just a needless way to check out. So it certainly is a bad look, and I think that it's way worse now than it was when I was much younger. And I got to tell you, it's just like anything. Everybody just wants to take it to the next level, the next level, the next level, and I think we've hit maximum saturation with that. Our folks have a potentially odd situation. Wondering what are your thoughts on my 19 Challenger having lost about 8 ounces of that 1234YF, but with no leaks detected during service. Are you sure that it lost it, or was it short-filled initially? That's one to consider. Also, don't forget that varying atmospheric conditions can change how much of the refrigerant that system will take. So I really wouldn't worry so much about it, provided that everything is working the way that it should. Now, if you notice that there is a diminished, and remember, it's super hot right now, and 1234 is it's okay. If you notice a significant loss of cooling performance, and it can be solved by augmenting the amount of refrigerant that's in the system, then you probably do have a leak somewhere, and it might be worth a check, do the chem dye check with that. But chances are it may have been shy. I've seen, or I've heard, I haven't done it personally, but I've heard of some systems being shy from the factory. I've never heard of 1234 ever being overcharged. I'll put it to you that way. But in my own personal experience with AC stuff, which is admittedly not, expert level, but I have messed with it a little bit, just enough to know some things about it. Unless there is a significant issue, like typically you would find a leak somewhere. It'll be the PAG oil. It'll be just kind of dripping or something. I can tell you this. When I was refilling the AC in the Mustang, there was an issue with the AC pump. Something was going on with it. I'm not sure. It just hadn't been running a long time. Remember, that car sat for years. Something broke loose anyway. Had a little bit of a leak. Kind of blew out one of the seals, but then it swelled back up and everything was cool. It was really weird on that car. Anyway, but yeah, hopefully that answers the question. It shouldn't be any leaks. But I would verify that, make sure that it is cooling the way that it should. And right now is a really rough time on AC stuff. Hopefully that helps. Stuart, 6.1 manifold is heavy, about 30 pounds. That is correct, but folks seem to like it, but will it outflow a 6.4? In certain parts it does, and this is the big difference between a fixed runner, which is a traditional regular intake manifold like the 5.7 has, and the 6.4 liter, which is the variable runner. If a 6.1 has been extrude honed, it's gonna flow really well, but you remember that it's not about the flow, it's about basically what it is it's tuning the air charge going through the runners. A big, good flowing pipe, a large diameter pipe can flow a lot of air, but it won't flow very much air at specific velocities based on the air demands of the engine itself. So in some areas it'll do well, in other areas it won't. Okay, so characteristically, the 6.1 will not flow as good as the 6.4 in high RPM applications. But you have to understand that that's high RPM applications are like 5,700 RPM to 6,500 RPM. That's really more what you're looking at, that last 1,000 RPM that carries you through on the back half of the track, or that you see the peak power come in at on a dyno. Where the 6.1 does very well is through the mid-range and at, say, between 4,500 RPM and 6,000 RPM. That's where it does all of its work. Basically right in the rev to, shift, and then fall back to portion on the tack, if you will. Figuring like a 1500 RPM split between gears. So, does it flow more? In some areas, yes. In some areas, no. It's just because of the nature of a fixed runner versus a variable runner intake. Goldfish, thank you so much. You are awesome, man. Thank you. Bob, 1150 altitude, 2300. We see that a lot down here. Yeah, no, I think you're good on that. That 2300 DA down here is like summer evening DA down here. Let me see something real quick. Yeah, I don't know, man. I wouldn't want to see you spend the money on a 6.1 just for that. Skids, what's up? There's a lot of guys getting some good results with the 5.7. The 6.1, again, it just depends on what your goals are for the car, man. Alex is saying, hey, B, noticed a small drip under my rear diff each time I parked it the last 3 times, maybe a teaspoon or less. 2010 Challenger SRT8 Auto. Could this be a seal leak or do I need to replace it? Probably a seal leak, or like it's a, you've got 2 seals where the axles go into the main body of the differential, and sometimes those can leak, or it could be, just check it that it's not the actual fill or drain plug. But more than likely, that's where it's coming from. Stuart, hey, thank you. Tomahawk 2.0, 228, 238, 111 for 392 needs headers, desperately needs headers, yes. So 228, 238 on a 111 is a healthy camshaft. I would say that on a 111, you know what that would be really good for? Centrifugal supercharger. That's a fun little cam for a Senti. Although I would probably want to bump that out to like 240. I'd be a little bit nitpicky, and I'd say I want to at least see 240 to 242. But yeah, that's a fun little cam. Now, it's a little bit beefy for a 111. I would probably maybe want to see that in on a 113, only just for the chop factor alone. It's going to be surgy, I can tell you that. With that duration and that LSA, but it'll be hellacious between about 4,600 RPM and 6,200 RPM. Bob said my altitudes, 1150 DA, mostly around 2,700. My goal is to get 1220 ET. So clean up the stock manifold, yes. And how would E85 work with your combo? Not well at all. Look, here's the thing with Echo Ocho Cinco. I don't want to say it would not work well. The whole thing with corn is it's kind of an interesting thing. So a lot of guys, you can run E85 so you can run more timing. Well, you've only got 10.5 to compression ratio, 10.5 to 1 compression ratio. So you don't have a lot of compression ratio to take advantage of the E85. E85 does carry with it 1 oxygen molecule or 1 oxygen atom per molecule, which is good because it is oxygenated by weight. In fact, it's a pretty healthy portion of that fuel is oxygen based on the molecular weight. Matter of fact, let's see. Let's see, CH3OH is C2H5OH, hold on. What is that? C2H5OH, yeah, alcohol. It's got a mole weight of 46 and it's 34.73% oxygen. So it's got a heavy amount of oxygen as opposed to regular gasoline, which doesn't have any. Which is C8H18, by the way. I can get into the weeds on fuel if y'all want me to. If you just let me know. But anyway, getting back to it. The problem with E85, though, number one, you don't really have, you can't take advantage of it because you're not under timed. In other words, if I throw more timing at your car, it won't pick up power necessarily on really high quality 93 octane or say 104 octane race fuel. I'm not going to pick up a lot of power because the compression ratio is fairly low, and it's in a fairly happy place already from the factory. That, but it is oxygenated, and so at lower RPM, it will pick up torque for sure. And the reason for that is you don't need as much fuel. Remember that with E85, you have to use 30% more fuel, which is to say 30% more mass. But you have a finite tube, which is your intake runner and going into your combustion chamber. So what does that mean? Well, what that means is the fluid of the fuel will displace the fluid of the air that's coming into that chamber. And you got to have the air. As a matter of fact, you've got to have quite a bit of atmospheric air to kick off that fuel. And so because of that, the higher in the RPM range you go, the higher the air demand is, also the higher the fuel demand, but you've got 30% more mass entering the whole conversation, if you will, and it starts to displace too much air, so your gains start to diminish pretty rapidly. That is not the case with forced induction air, because that extra mass just gets crammed into the cylinder along with all this extra air. The compressor does not care what it's compressing nor what's going along with it. So that's why it works beautifully with boost. But for naturally aspirated setups, you've almost got to build an engine around that fuel, and there's just not enough airflow, mass airflow. The runners aren't big enough. You're not moving enough air through RPM, and you don't have enough of a compression ratio to fully take advantage of the extra octane that's going to be a part of it. So personally, I typically tell guys, do not worry about corn. Not for the NA stuff. And again, Stuart, thank you, buddy. X is asking, can I see myself in another Viper? Funny you should ask. My Smoking Hot and I were talking about this, and there have been some GTS Vipers come up pretty cheap here lately. The only problem is they've been pretty rough, and so I was looking at the prospect of picking up another GTS and doing a build. I've still got a computer for one. I still have my shifter knob floating around here somewhere. And I was basically going to kind of do a clone of that one right up there in your top left of your screen. And, you know, I got to thinking, well, that wouldn't be too bad. And then I got to looking at the platform and I thought, well, shit, little Hurricane HO motor would be the shit in a Viper. I mean, it would be less weight. It's a turbocharged engine. If that would bolt up to a Tremec 6-speed manual, that'd be a lot of fun, right? So I was looking at that and I was thinking about it, but if the right car came along, I would certainly give it a look. But I mean, it would almost have to be gifted to me at this point, because I've got so many irons in the fire right now, just with life and everything else going on. It would make it fairly difficult to put it together, but I think I know some folks that could get the work done for me in terms of just putting the engine in the car, doing the wiring, and I mean, how cool would that be? It wouldn't sound any different than it does already. So, you know, what's the harm in that? Plus, it'd be a lot of fun. I would build just a real just a I don't know, mid 10-second stick shift car. Just go play with it, you know. Basically just build what it would be. It'd be an American Supra, and that would be about it. Little 1050 car that I could get out and just scoot around and, you know, do burnouts for distance and just have fun with. But we shall see. Again, if I can find one, I don't really want an RT10. I'd prefer a GTS. But I mean, if I could find just a freaking dirt cheap RT10, I probably wouldn't bitch too much about that either. Hell, hell, it might be fun to have a little vert. It'd be just, I mean, it is, and it was. You have to remember that the Viper, that was a Shelby derived thing. That was the new AC Cobra. The Daytona coupe would have been the GTS, and of course the AC car would have been the RT10. I'm not a huge fan of the RT10, but from an automobile standpoint, I think it's better. It's got a Targa roof, which means fun in the sun, wind in your skin, and so I just, I'm still a GTS guy at heart though, and I would probably look more at that. The only downside to doing a Viper is the fact that the suspension geometry is terrible in those cars. They can be a little bit lively to drive, but and I would go with a manual rack too. So it would be just, if I did something like that, it would be the engine going into the car with a manual steering rack, and that'd be it. That's all I would do with it. It'd be a lot of fun, I think. Be a fun little car to drive. And who's to say that type of a setup wouldn't be ideal for an RT10? I've got a thing for GTSs, but you know what? For the right car, an RT10 would be probably pretty cool. Hard Rock, hope everyone's having a good weekend. Viper content, yes. Lime is in. I made it, yes. Drop an I6. I was saying your knowledge is unbelievable. Thank you for your advice. Hopefully I'm helping. DM is in. Good evening, chat friends. Good evening. Robert the Smith, thank you very much. I appreciate you hanging out with us, man. Thank you. Let's celebrate their first super chat. Thank you very much, Bob. I appreciate that, buddy. So where were we? Oh yeah. So that's what if it comes up and I can get my hands on one, if it's a roached ass Viper, like something along those lines, then yeah, I would probably take a look at it. But again, it would have to be crazy cheap, and it would have to just show up at the shop with, on the back of a truck, it rolls off, here's your paperwork type of a thing. But you never know, stranger things have happened. I think the dims of the Hurricane would fit pretty good in that car too. Plus, here's the main thing. You got to be kind of careful with Vipers. In fact, now that I'm thinking about it, it might be better to do this with an RT10, because you've got to remember that the car is set up specifically to deal with the weight and the length of a 10-cylinder engine. But hey guys, fun fact, Vipers are heavier in the rear than they are in the front from the factory, at least the GTS is. And so it would definitely, there might have to be a little bit of ballast to take into account so that it's not too ass happy. They get kind of weird. So I used to I did circuit track with my Viper, as well as drag racing and roll racing. A lot of roll racing. I ought to do like a roll racing diaries. Anyway, as we were into it when it first started getting hairy. And anyway, yeah, Vipers are weird because you literally, for apexing, they're set up, they understeer badly because of the weight distribution. So it's just something that you have to, you learn how to work around it, you learn how to deal with it. But yeah, the steering inputs can be kind of weird. And the problem with that is that if the rear end decides it wants to get a little bit curious with what the front of the car looks like, it's like you're working with an incredibly, because of the weight placement. I'm going to try to explain this. This may or may not make a lot of sense. Because of the weight placement being further back in the car, what that does is it has the net effect of shortening the wheelbase in terms of how it reacts to any kind of traction limited situation, okay? So when we're talking about the rear end stepping out, it has that net effect of wanting to come around more violently. The moment of inertia, if you will, is when it is broken, the car really wants to come around. It's one of the reasons why a lot of people got into a lot of trouble with Vipers back in the day, is because they didn't handle like a Corvette, where Corvettes are very predictable. I mean, Corvette is practically a purpose-built drift machine. The Viper, at least for the earlier Gen 2 cars, not so much. Gen 3, Gen 4, yeah. Man, I tell you what, a Gen 3 would be about right for that. Instead of, hold up, wait a minute. Because those things are hideous. Nobody wants a Gen 3. They're ugly as sin. But they're far better than the Gen 2s. So if you've ever seen the movie The Fast and the Furious, you may have heard of it. They had 2 yellow Vipers in that movie. I got a chance to drive one of those at a VOI event, and I had a really good time with that car. So, but yes, far and away better handling car than the Gen 2. Maybe I need to look at that. X saying you'd probably get a lot of views doing that swap in a Viper. I would think so, at least. I would hope so. Sovereign, yeah, the Gen 1 Viper. Well, I mean, okay, so a fun fact. So when Carroll Shelby was originally, when they were putting the Viper, hatching a plan, if you will, for the Viper, the original engine was to be an all aluminum 360. And it didn't go that way, but Carroll Shelby was bucking severely for a V8, not the V10 in that car. He didn't want the V10 at all. By the way, the V10, the guy that developed the V10 that's in the car, it was developed, the guy was a big Pontiac fan. And if you've ever seen a 383, the dims on a 383, I believe that the 488 cube engine is basically a 383 with 2 extra cylinders or something like that. It's pretty funny. But the original use, if I remember correctly, or the engine that it was loosely also based off of, was a Lamborghini Marine engine. Kind of interesting fun facts there. That car was, I'll put it to you like this, the Gen 2 car, Gen 1 for sure was bad. Gen 1 was as close to the AC cover as you could get. It did not have roll-up windows or anything else like that. But one of the things about it is that they have extremely high initial tip-in torque, and that provided with the fact that they've got bad suspension geometry, where it's like it also acts like the lower control arm in the rear is like only this long, and so any small amount of movement results in, like, if you can imagine this notepad being the tire, right? A short or a long lower control arm, as it moves, doesn't really affect the rear tire too much in terms of attitude. If this is flat, as it moves, you lose contact patch, as you can see. Well, the Viper, it's like it just barely moves. You lose a lot of contact patch when you've got that thing loaded up in a corner. So that's another reason why you got to be careful with them. Let's see, Bob's asking, what would help my car from pushing through the brakes at the starting line? It happens around 2,500 RPM. 2,500 RPM is going to be tough because that's about the stall. What all's done to your car? Oh, wait, 3,200 RPM, I think is what you said your stall was. Okay, so here's the thing when it comes to stall. I don't know who did the stall. So 3,200 can be as low as 2,500. A 2,500 can flash to 32, depending on the weight and the torque characteristics of the engine. There's a lot that can go on there. But there's a couple of things that can help you. One is just better brake pads in the rear. That way you can just literally load the car harder. Pressing the brake pedal harder can also help. But aside from that, there is not a lot. If here, one of the things when you're foot braking a car, what I've learned in drag racing over the years is what you want to do is you want to hit the converter. Stalling a car up at that. Okay, so let me start over. I'm going to start with kind of an absurd thing, and then I'll walk it backwards so you can kind of see where this is coming from. It might not be as big of a deal as you think. In fact, you might be in a really good place. So when I would drive cars for guys that would have like a 5,500 RPM stall, I would foot brake these things. I would not hit them on a two-step. You can bring the thing up to about 4,000 RPM as it's loaded, and you can feel the thing kind of lift. You can feel it really start to load the chassis. When I would feel the chassis load, that was it. I didn't try to do anything else. I didn't try to have it stall at 5,000 RPM. That's not the goal. The goal is to get the RPM up to where the torque converter is allowing the chassis to be loaded, and that's about as far as you're going to go. Yellow, 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 bam, go. Foot comes off, foot goes to the floor, and you flash this thing over, and it flashes and hits that 5,500 RPM stall speed, if you will. So it's almost like you're dumping the clutch on the thing. That's really what you're going for. So the same can be applied to some of the trucks that'll run 4,400 RPM stalls. That is the same kind of technique where you'll hold it at about 3,000 RPM. You're not holding it at 44. So check, if you can, data log the car. Next time you run it, hold it at about 2,500 RPM if that's what it takes to kind of load up that chassis. And then once you get it to load up the chassis, you don't have to really push it too much further. If you drill the throttle at that point and you get that thing to flash over to 35, you've actually kind of done what you came to do to begin with. A lot of times guys will go way too aggressive with their converters. And what ends up happening is you might have, say, a 4,000 RPM, or let's say it's a 5,000 RPM converter, when in reality, a 4,000 RPM would be good. And what I try to tell folks is, think of it like this. If you're building a race car, set your stall for about 300 RPM shy of peak torque. If you're building a street car, somewhere around 3,200 to 3,400 RPM is going to be okay, because it'll allow you some street ability for some of the older style, converters. But some of the newer style, you can actually play around with that a little bit, and they'll flash a little bit higher up. But the idea is to get them to flash up, and they're going to flash up real quick. You don't have to park it at a specific number. One other trick to that, by the way, for guys that would run nitrous especially, they would run a converter that would be like a 3,000 RPM converter at their power level of the engine without nitrous, and then when they would launch the car on the button, it would actually force it to stall higher. Because a stall rating, you got to remember, a stall rating is not always, there's no such thing as a torque converter that stalls at, say, 3,000 RPM. If I've got, some little 2.5 liter 4-cylinder naturally aspirated thing, with that same converter, it's probably going to stall at about 1,500 RPM. Conversely, if I had some kind of crazy, big block with a turbo or something like that, that same converter could be a 5,000 or 6,000 RPM converter. So it just depends on how that ends up working out. DM saying, I drove a Gen 1 Viper. It was a bit unruly. Cool car, though, for sure. Sinister saying, you need an evaporator. There you go. I've replaced at least 100 of them on Challengers and Chargers. They are junk. There you have it. That could very well be it, too. So, yeah, that is, I haven't seen the evaporator thing, but I believe you entirely, because a lot of the cooling system stuff and a lot of the AC, I haven't had to mess with that with the trucks, but the Challengers, I can see that being an issue. But I've also seen them shy. I've seen all kinds, but yeah, it is. You work in the shop, you see all kinds of weird stuff. Weird, big time. Noav just sent over a message. No, that did not have anything to do with you, Noav. That had to do with a couple of others that I had helped out. Don't worry, you're safe. And what he was asking about is I am not going to be doing any more peer reviews, and I'm not going to be doing anything like that. There's obviously the guys that I would normally work with in different shops. That's a completely different story. The guys that I have worked with to get to a certain place, obviously those I've got skin in that game. I want to help them to do well. This is for something completely unrelated, bro. Don't sweat it. But getting back to it, okay, so we talked about the 5.7 and really know your limitations and know what you can get away with. The 5.7 you can just simply have more fun with. It is more of a Lego set than the 392 is. Now, what I want to do is I want to talk about the 392, but what I need you to understand about the 392, guys, is that it is not fragile, okay? It simply isn't. It's everything that is attached to that thing is what becomes fragile when you start to throw mods at that car. So let's dive into it. Intake manifold porting, yeah, it definitely can help. But again, let me just put a bit of a caveat here. For you guys with 392 cars, if you're planning on modifying the thing, don't. The reason why I say don't worry about it. You didn't necessarily buy a hobby kit when you bought a 392. You bought a car that already has the displacement. It's got a good cam. It's got it's great exhaust system from the factory. It's got a lot of things going for it already. The problem is that you put a cam in that car, you put exhaust on that car, and you put a Hellcat airbox with a Hellcat filter on it. If you've got a dynamics package car, you can do the brake duct mod, which allows more air to get up into the fender well for the Hellcat airbox. But you can do the fun little things. But I want to caution you before you take it any further. A small cam, some weight reduction, airbox, obviously a tune to go with it because you got to do it with a tune and the cam. But even without a cam, it's a low 11-second car in unbelievably good air, right? But it's at least a mid 11-second car. What is your goal anymore after that? If you want to go with a cam car, super. You've basically built a pretty generic 1080 car at that point. Be happy with that and let it slide. And by the way, this is a weight reduced Challenger, not a Charger, although you can get really close with a Charger. But that's where you're going to end up. That's where your world is going to pretty much end. I don't like seeing guys put blowers on scat packs. I don't like seeing guys try to put axles or drive shafts or this thing or that thing or this tchotchke or that whatever. The reason why I say all of that, and then like the 1320 torque converter, which is basically just the pickup truck torque converter, there's no reason to go any deeper than that, because what ends up happening is you will end up sinking this amount of money into that car, and it's your car, right? But it's all about the theater at that point. You've got a big block Challenger at that point. You've got a cam. And look, if it's close to 400 cubic inches, bro, it's a big block, all right? Um, there's no, and Jason had just he just popped up on the other feed. No, dude, it's again, you're safe. This is something that has nothing to do with you, bro. I'm just, and again, send me your stuff so I can go over it because we got a record to break, bro. But the thing is that when you're messing with the 392, it's already there. There's some things that can be improved upon, but you've got everything there that you need. You don't need ported heads. The Eagle heads are already awesome. The intake manifold just needs to get cleaned up. If you want to go bigger, faster, better, whatever, guys will, okay, so guys will go, well, what about a stroker combination? Okay. I want to put a 426 because I want a 426 Hemi. No, you don't. I mean, you do, but you don't. Because if you want to spend that kind of money, just put a blower on the thing. The 426s don't necessarily run harder per se than a 392 with similar modifications. And again, yeah, it's a 392 and you can make a lot of power with a 392. Do not get me wrong. You can go high ram, huge cam, big headers, lots of tune, lots of converter, etc., and build a hell of an NA car. But the problem is that it's still very heavy. And you've got to know what you're working with. And again, just like in the title of the show, know your limitations. Look, it's a heavy car, but it's got a very snappy engine. And guys, I got to tell you, there are times where I wish I would have just kept the SRT. Don't get me wrong, I loved my Hellcat. I was able to have a hell of a run with that car. I set every record for stock boost 93 octane that you can have. And between Jim and myself, we hit every single, I mean, we were beating each other up for a number of years for who could have the fastest 93 octane car on the globe. Nobody else was doing what we were doing. After a while, we were just the only two guys left that cared about that. But I had gone really quick with SRTs. I run 1120 with a car with just some mild weight reduction. So, you know, I don't really know. Anyway, I guess the point that I'm getting to, the car that I've had the most fun with is a 392 car. But that was Ray's 1320. And that was just because he and I, for about 2 hours one night, were going at it, trying to run quicker than a 1220 on the street, as delivered, 32 PSI in the tires, 2 guys in the car. We ran the thing practically until we ran out of gas, went and put gas in it, came back, and it was, he and I would just trade back and forth. This was on the street. We made pass after pass after pass after pass after pass. And we would just match each other's numbers every single time. And he finally went a 12.19 and beat me. Like, I legit could not get any quicker than that. So, but it took him a hell of a long time, and he was trying to beat me at a 12.2 flat. So, go figure. But we would do that. We were doing that on the street as delivered, full weight, 2 dudes in the car. And that, to me, it was just a lot of fun, man. I mean, you know, and that's where a lot of guys, get it wrong. And so anyway, that's where a lot of guys get it wrong. Put that phrase in a bucket. We're going to come back and fish it out. But look, don't put a blower on a 392 car. And I know I've said one of my favorite all-time cars was a Candy Stripe 6-speed 392 car we put a Pro Charger on. Yes, I still stand by that. But it wasn't any more fun with the blower. It was just a fun car in general. But the 392, that's a good NA car. Just rock it as an NA car. If you want to build a blower car, build a 5.7. It's an easier car to build a hot rod out of anyway. You got the same transmission. It's just and plus if you frag the thing, it's a shitload easier to fix and cheaper too. I shouldn't say easier, cheaper. If you want to build a hot rod like that, get you a 5.7. If you want to keep something NA, stick with the 392. You'll thank me for this later. Um, but let's go back to the bucket. Okay. Remember that you're here to have fun. So, you know where I'm going next. Hellcat. And this applies to all Hellcat variants. One of the things about the Hellcat variant is it is very easy to go fast. No av. Jesus, my man. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Didn't have to do that, but thank you, my brother. And I'll tell you more about that story. Whenever you send me over your stuff, I'll tell you what happened. I'll keep it off the show. But thank you very much. I appreciate that. Again, there's a problem with the Hellcat that you just can't get past. And that problem is it's so easy to modify those cars that you can make them frighteningly fast for the street, but you can also make them frighteningly boring for the street. You can make it to where it's just not fun anymore to play with on the street, because Hellcats don't really get interesting until somewhere north of about 135 miles per hour. Hellcats, with the way that they're sprung, if you're using the stock front sway bar, which is very heavy but very, very stiff, the car is unimaginably stable and will run at 130, 40, 50 miles an hour, and you won't even notice it. I'll put it to you another way. When I was data logging my Hellcat, I would be going down the area where I was doing all of my high speed, high load, high RPM testing. That high load, high RPM testing, that road wasn't straight. That road was actually a long right-hand sweeper. And you may ask, well, what kind of, well over 150 miles an hour. And I'm just driving, looking at my data log, and I'm in a sweeper, okay? If people say Challengers don't handle well, they handle that kind of handling very well, because that's what they were designed to do. Remember, our cars were derived from the W211 and W212 E-Class Mercedes, okay? That car was designed to run on the Autobahn at triple-digit speeds indefinitely. Like, that's what it was designed to do, and that's why the Hellcat does extremely well at what it does. It's another reason why I get so freaking annoyed when people put Challengers and Chargers up against Mustangs and Camaros. There's such a huge difference between these cars. The fact that one has two doors and one doesn't, it doesn't really... It's like you can compare anything, okay? I can compare apples to oranges. I do that a lot. Matter of fact, do I want apple juice or do I want orange juice? Do I want, do I want to eat an apple or I can compare the two, okay? But I don't know. It's one of these things where it's not the same initial platform type of a car. And so it's hard to, anyway, I put it like this. If I want to go 150, 170 miles per hour and just lock in the cruise control, so to speak, I'm doing that in one of the Mopars. I'm not doing that in one of the other cars. And it'll happily just usher you down the road. Fun story. So, you guys know that we did at Pikes Performance, when I worked at Pikes, we built Excessive, which is Racer X's old Charger. And when I delivered that car to him, I drove it from Houston to Dallas, and it was kind of funny because I was trying to get really good fuel mileage out of it. Like, that was a running gag, was how good of a fuel mileage could I get out of it, only until he goes, hey, how does it pull? Is it stable? Does it, from a highway hit? And I was on the drag radials, so I pulled over, actually dropped the pressure in the drag radials a little bit, or checked them and made sure they were sitting right at about 24, 25 PSI. And I had him on the phone, and I said, okay, bro, you get to hear it rip. And I went watt at about 100 miles an hour and just stayed in it until Well, I stayed in it for a long time, and it's just kind of funny because it wrecked my fuel economy, man. Anyway, that these cars can get to a point where they're not. It's not that they're not drivable. They're very drivable. That's the scary part of it, is that they have unimaginably good street manners. It's just that there's so much power on reserve that by the time things get interesting, put it like this, by the time you notice that you're having any fun, you've gone deep into lose your driver's license and go straight to jail kind of territory. So, that's kind of the thing with Hellcats. But what are the limitations? For the earlier cars, about 1,000 horsepower is about as deep as you want to get into the car. The later cars have a little bit better hardware in them, so like 17 and up. I'd say those things will live very happily at 1,000 horsepower on E85, like real happily. A 17 and up car, 17's a hell of a good year for Hellcats, by the way. But any of the Hellcat variants, again, they will hold and live at 1,000 horsepower for what feels like forever. But that being said, it's, can you deal with it for forever? And can you, okay, and the reason why I ask is because there's a dirty little statistic that we used to keep track of with the Hellcats. And that was that once somebody changed the boost number, like once somebody started throwing more boost at the car, the timeline was usually about 6 months, at the most a year. And then they would sell the car because something would happen. They would start to worry about longevity. They would start to worry about blowing the thing up, basically. They would start to worry about, I'll put it like this, they had acute situational awareness. And what I mean by that is they would take the car out and they would have one of their friends with them. And they wouldn't wreck it, but they would come really close. And it would scare the pants off of them, and they would want to get rid of the car. Like, that's it. They don't want to mess with this thing anymore. It's just, it's too much of a burden, too much of a hassle. And that would happen regularly. But the big takeaway here was they would blow them up. So how do you manage blowing up one of these cars? Well, it's real simple. To get to that kind of power level and to be able to stay at that power level, like reliably, like anvil kind of reliability, you have to be on E85. And what would end up happening is they would go, oh, I can run 93. It's not going to hurt anything. I'm not going to get on it too much. If I get on it a little bit, it won't matter. Watch this. Yeah, it's 93. What? Yeah, boom. Oh, no. And that's what ends up happening, is that they end up blowing the thing up. And this happened more times than I really want to admit, is that they would frag the thing and they couldn't understand why. And we would tell them, you have to run E85. You have to run 85 all the time, every time. Like, you don't have a choice in this. But somehow or another, their car was special, and somehow or another, they knew better than us. And yeah, they'd get out there and blow it up. Or they would have a bad tank of E85. And you might think, how often does that happen? That's bullshit. You can't really. Oh, really? Guys, it's happened to me not once, twice, thrice, but 4 times. First time it happened to me, I thought I blew a car up on the dyno. The second time it happened to me, not happened to me, happened around me. 5 times. I'm sorry, 5 times. The second time, I caught it. In fact, I caught it as I was strapping the car down on the dyno. I noticed the exhaust didn't smell like corn. I immediately shut everything down. I was like, no, this isn't looking good. It had been idling, and I looked at I got into the car, checked it, short-term fuel trims. It was pissed. So anyway, yeah, got done with that. The third time and the fourth time happened to a buddy of mine with his car at the absolute worst possible times that it could have happened. He was down here, a buddy of mine from Dallas, quick break. The fifth time happened to me very recently with Whitey, Ford F-150 pickup truck. I filled her up at a gas station that's known for having pretty good E85, and the best that my trucks own through data logging, the best my truck could sum up on that thing was 62%. That's not good. That's not good at all. So, yeah, I can tell you that it happens, and I can tell you that it happens to happen a lot, at least around me. And so, guys, you know, I would never tell somebody don't modify your Hellcat. But again, you need to know its limitations. But in this case, you need to know your limitations. Are you really ready to deal with a 9-second car? Another thing, too, is guys don't really know, and they don't realize how fast these cars are and what the difference is between a car that goes from 1050s to 950s. So let's say you've got a stock Hellcat and you've done a little bit of weight reduction and you put drag pack wheel and tire setup on it, and you have a real solid, easy money 1050, 1040 car in really good air. And you get that itch, baby. You get that itch, and you want to put together, you want a 9-second pass. This is exactly how this goes. I'm just ring, ring. Hello. Hi. Yeah, I've got this. I've been 1050. This is my whole life story. I want to go 9s. Are you sure? Yeah, I got a buddy of mine that's got to dig them up and hard out, get 0 to 60 fast on 9s. I mean, all right, build you a 9-second car. But here's the thing: we're going to give you a driver orientation, and when we're done, because you need to understand what it is that you're just about to get yourself into. Guys, the difference, and the more, it's not like you just get 100 more horsepower and you get, no, it takes orders of magnitude more power. What is it? Half the mass divided by the square of the power divided by the hypotenuse of whatever. Anyway, all I know is that it takes a shitload more power to go 1 second faster when you are going to build a car that goes that fast. There's a lot more to it than just throwing power at it. So anyway, you would get done with this car, and the shock on the look of the face of these guys when the first time they would ride in their own car, not drive it. I would take them out onto Beltway 8, and we'd put a set of drag radials on it and go, okay, you ready? Yeah, let's see what this thing can do. And it's just watt the throttle. And nobody ever takes a breath at that point. Like, the difference is staggering between what a stock Hellcat will do versus what is in essence almost 50% more power when that hits. And this is on drag radials, and I would be hazing the tires at 130 miles an hour. And goddamn, yeah, it shit. It's like, yeah, that's what you paid for. And since you wanted it, you bought it. You spend your money, you take your chance, and that's what ends up happening. So these guys get the car. They don't ever say, "Oh, that's way too much. I can't believe I screwed up, man." It doesn't ever work like that. They get the car and then they're scared to drive it. Then they do drive it. They try to get it figured out, but they don't have a background in racing, and they don't ever, get with anybody and say, "Hey, man, I need help. I don't know what I'm doing with this thing." They don't ever admit to not knowing what they're doing. I have driven more other people's cars for them at the drag strip to get them a time slip than I care to actually admit to. Okay. In fact, I don't know that this is not a record, but I may hold is there a record for how many 9-second passes you made in other people's cars? I don't think I own it, but I'm probably up somewhere up there. Because that does happen. Or did happen, I should say. And all of them, 960, 970. Let me check in with you guys. Let's see. And again, no have. Thank you, buddy. And yeah, I'll give you a shout tomorrow. I'm saying, when you pulled your passenger seat on your Hellcat, did you get an airbag light? Oh, yeah. Pretty serious. Yeah, it's straightforward, no issues. Yeah, it's easy to do. It's what is it? 10 millimeter. It's the little kind of a starry looking hex bolt, but yeah, it's a 10 millimeter, and there's 4 bolts. I think I used a 3/8 inch socket, is what ended up working. And yeah, the first couple of times you disconnect those connectors, they'll be pretty brutal. But yeah, you'll get the seatbelt thing, but that's not a big deal. Don't worry about that. But yes, that will absolutely pop up. So our Mustang is a pony car for sure. Challenger Charger is Musal. Oh, Sovereign, yeah, you can have a lot of fun with Scatties. That's the thing. They're fast. They are fast. Look, they're fast, guys. It's just that, look, they're in a bubble, in a vacuum, in a devoid of the burden of comparison. They're exceptionally fast, and they're very good. Matter of fact, listen, let me. So those are the limitations of the Hellcat, by the way. Just know your own limitations. The car, you're not gonna hit the limitations of that car. It will go, and you can make them it's just the sky's the limit. How big's your wallet check? But no, with the stock supercharger on corn, it's cake to get that thing to 1,000 horsepower at the flywheel. So don't worry about that. It's your own limitations, and it's your own ego that you've got to really check. Don't. This is no place to get. Don't look. I've told guys this in the past. Do not let your ego write a check that your skill set cannot cash. All right. That applies to a lot of things in life, especially when we're talking about going into or getting into a vehicle that can achieve velocities that are fatal in a matter of time that you can't react to it if you're not used to it. And even if you're used to it, it doesn't mean that's not a guarantee that everything's going to go swimmingly. Okay, let's put that out there for you. So know your own limitations with that. And I'll get off my soapbox on that. Let me check in with you guys. Sorry, hopefully without breaking the law. Dude, we're here to break laws, bro. Scat packs are just ridiculous fun on the street. You're very much a part of that 0 to 100 miles per hour. That's right. That's right. And look, that's cool. That's why, listen, a Scatty on drag radials is a riot to drive. It's a lot of fun. It's a great car. So that's my kind of car. Scats do sound really good, for sure. Hemi roar is intoxicating. 9-second felony, yeah. Sorry, I remember B said if you want to build a car that goes 9s, you really got to build it for 8s. You better believe it. You build it from the back to the front, baby. You build that thing you overbuild it, and it's safe. It's a safety thing more than anything else. But yes, if you want to build a 9-second car, there are some things within reason, but yeah, build it for way faster and way stronger. That thing got a 9-second. Yeah, it's pretty much it. Sovereign hexagon. I don't know. You have to work on your skills. It took me a while to harness my 392, learning the throttle. A lot of throttle control. Dude, thoughts on a 391 gear and a NAG 157 car? Ouch. Okay, so we did this on a couple of, you're going to love this, 426 builds. So these are cars that were hitting, 470, 480 to the rear wheels on a Mustang dyno. Before they had the 426s put in them. Cam the whole bit. We're done with them. Different cam. They're pretty stout. They're around 530 to 545 to the rear wheels. 390 gear in a NAG 1. The problem with it is you're about 3,000 RPM at 80 miles per hour. They are a buzzy thing to drive. I would not do that. For a NAG 1 car, I would be much more inclined to go with a set of 370 gears if you're going to put gears in it at all. That will be the way that I would take a look at that, because the 392s in a street style sized tire, it can be a bit cumbersome. Now, that being the case, if that doesn't bother you, then it's not that big of a deal. But again, you just got to remember it's going to be a little bit buzzy going down the highway if you spend a lot of time on the highway. But in general, there's really nothing technically wrong with it. And on the drag strip, it launches like a monster. I think I missed a couple of you guys up here. Noav checked in, and I blasted down there to visit with him for a second. Let me make sure of that. Oh, Hard Rock saying, seems like a rabbit hole with my scat. If I wanted to mod, I have the dynamics package and run a K&N drop-in. That's really all you need to do. DM saying, many times I've wondered if I'd been happier with a 1320 scat instead of my Hellcat. This is a funny thing for me, bro, because... shit. So... Oh, the point that I was going to make. So talking about the 1320, guys, you got to remember that before the GT500 circa 2007, before the GT500 came the Terminator Mustang. The Lightning begat the Terminator Mustang, right? You get into that part of it. Ford led the craze with the supercharged hot rod, leading with the Lightning back in 99, then you had the Termi in 03, you had the GT500 in 2007, and the list goes on, right? But those cars, well, those vehicles, trucks and cars, were made at a time where there was no competition. Ford didn't have to make them, and they just threw out the gauntlet. They made the baddest of the badass cars. Still to this day, wicked badass fast. But here's the thing. For a long time, it was just really Mustang and Challenger. For a hot, and then came the Camaro. But I guess the point that I'm trying to make is there wasn't a Hellcat to compare it to. And in the absence of the Hellcat, the 1320 would have been the top of the food chain when it comes to Dodge hot rods, or at least V8 powered Dodge hot rods. But the Scat Pack core would have been the car to really kick it off, which was just a base model Scat Pack. I guess the point that I'm trying to make is there was a hot minute where there wasn't a supercharged variant, and we all seem to survive pretty well without it. I'm really torn in this because on one hand, I really like the Hellcat platform. I like the Hellcat platform not because it's necessarily faster, but because it is that much more durable. The HP90 transmission, the stiffer, with the better drive shaft, it needs a Scat Pack front sway bar. But there are things about the Hellcat that are just better in general. Taking the performance out of it. I mean, but it's got these other parts because of the performance envelope, so I get that. But damn, the Scat Pack's a lot of fun. And it's not the problem with the Scat Pack is that the Hellcat exists, right? Like it's tough to be a bully when you have a bully, right? And that's what happened to the Scat Pack. The Mustang never really suffered that. I mean, you can talk about the GT500, I guess, but the GT500 was a completely different animal. It had a different type of transmission. It was really more for a completely different buyer. It's not even considered a Mustang GT500. It's just the GT500 when people talk about it. Kind of like the GT350 in a way. But the GT350, again, it wasn't offered with an automatic transmission. So you can't, it was like they would pass each other in the hallway, but there wasn't any real beef between 350, the 5, and the GT. Whereas with Mopar, man, it was always, 392 trying to beat up on a 345 car only to have Hellcat show up and just, you know what I mean? So, there with the Ford, yeah, there was a hierarchy, but it wasn't the same. You didn't get the same sense of hierarchy that you would that with a Ford that you did with the Mustang, or you didn't get it in the Mustang like you did in the Mopar stuff. But you also didn't see it with, I'm getting way ahead of myself mentally. You also didn't see it with a Camaro. Like all the different, I mean, the Camaro was just the Camaro. Then you had the ZL1, which was offered with an automatic. But you didn't really, there wasn't a third kid, right? So that's the problem. And so there was a definite, distinct separation between the NA Camaro guys and the supercharged guys. NA on nitrous would usually win that argument, by the way, just to let you know. Because NA, doesn't that mean nitrous assisted? Anyway, I guess where I'm going with this is that there was always a weird sibling rivalry within Mopar when it came to, 5.7 versus 392 versus Scat Pack, or versus Hellcat, with the Scat Pack being the middle kid. And the problem with being the middle kid, remember what I was talking about, what all the stuff you can do to a 5.7? It's like having your little brother on gear, right? It's like if your little brother is on gear and trains regularly in some kind of a combat sport, at some point y'all are going to have to trade hands, right? That's just how siblings are. The thing is, it's going to be close, right? And meanwhile, Hellcat's just sitting there, watching this whole show unfold. So, look, there are times, guys, I got to tell you, there are a lot of times where I really do miss having a 392 car. I have thought at one point that I might get back into Mopar car stuff. And if I did, it'd be with like an older, like a 2017 Scat Pack core, and just find one that exists in the world and you know, just say screw it, put a cam in it, let her rip, and yeah, but I don't have anywhere to take it. The local track is a long way away, and I can blah 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 make excuses. Plus, it's expensive, and I don't have the room for it. I got other stuff going on. But if you guys want to do it, I want to help you along and make sure that you're as successful as you can possibly be. Your success is my success. Sorry, yeah, I do miss the old SRT Scatty. So I'm saying one day I took my V6 Challenger in for an oil change and drove out my Hellcat. Yeah, but I do feel like I missed the most true muscle car. Well, the thing is that I still stand by what I've said before, where I do think the 392 is the best engine that Dodge ever made, because it put real Hemi power into the hands of whoever wanted it, SUV or car, but they never put it in a pickup truck, which is freaking blasphemy as far as I'm concerned, but whatever. That to me, it's such a good engine. People say that it can't handle boost. What? Yeah, up to a certain point, it'll be just fine. But no, it's not going to handle 20 pounds of boost from the factory. It's not supposed to. That's not how this works, number one. And number two, it's still a port injected 11-to-1 compression engine. Like that's not conducive to boost. 10.5 is about as much as you can really go on the street, and that's where the 5.7 is. People go, well, what about the Coyote? It's 12-to-1. Yeah, it's got a dual fuel system too. So there's a lot going for that car and that platform that simply isn't going for the NA stuff. And, you know, a lot of times, you know, people always want to compare Hemis to the Coyote. The problem with that is the Coyote does amazingly well when you start to force feed it. That's where that platform puts in its best work. The real one you got to worry about are LSLT platforms, because you can just simply make them bigger engines. They're easier to bore out and make big. 400 and whatever cubic inches you want, you can make out of those engines. You can't do that with a Coyote. So but they're a dual fuel system, and direct injection can work wonders for boost. So yeah, you can put in crazy work with a 5-liter, where you're just not going to get the same out of a Hemi, because the Hemi is a different architecture. It's not better or worse. It's just different. And the end result when it comes to power, the power itself, that number is not the defining characteristic that will put an engine into, like, it can handle more boost, so it's a better engine. No, because it's not the engine that you're racing. It's the engine and all of the components that it's bolted to. And this is where a lot of guys get in trouble with Mustangs, or pickup trucks. Yeah, you can make, again, the Coyote is it's spooky because, you know, whatever with, you don't buy a Coyote because you want naturally aspirated, although I will tell you that my truck does haul ass for a pickup truck with a Coyote V8. But you buy the Coyote, if you're looking to modify it, you're going for boost, baby. I mean, you probably aren't even going to crack a seal on this thing. You're just throwing turbos or a blower on the thing. And that's where they really shine. And then everything else downstream breaks. And this is something that used to happen a lot with the Mustang guys, where they would build a 700 or an 800 horsepower engine to the rear wheels, but the transmission would let go. Axles would snap. All kinds of other things would potentially go wrong with this build. And it's because they didn't build the car, they only built power. And so you guys will go, you can $25,000, you can have an 8-second car. And I'm going, really? Go on, show me. You can't. Or they say, maybe not 8s, 940s. Really? Because I know how to make a 940 Hellcat. It's a Bravo package. It's really easy to go 940s, provided you got hella good air and enough weight reduction. 960s, 970s is a foregone conclusion that you're going that quickly. So, indeed, go on. Because if it was that easy, everybody would do it. I'm not saying you can't build a fast as hell Mustang. You can. You can build a 980 car, a 990 car pretty easily, and not really worry about anything downstream, upstream, or whatever. Trans will be fine, axles, whatever. Probably want to replace those along the way anyway. But yeah, you can do that. Just don't ask it to go like deep into modified Hellcat territory. Not without spending hella money where you're going to need to. And then, yeah, go for it. But again, know your limitations before you start getting in there and spending all this money. And then next thing you know, you now have to spend money or you got to ditch the project altogether. Sovereign's liking that 6.4. Very cool. Make sure. Okay, I think that's got us back caught up. Okay, here we go. Know how, Duke? Yes, the 390 works well in a Nag 1 car. It works well on a drag strip. I've driven them and I enjoyed it. They're snappy, that's for sure. Oh, sorry, imagine the 6.4 was actually a 6.2 like in the Hellcat but naturally aspirated. How would that compare against the 6.4? It would barely compare against the 5.7. So the 6.2, remember, it's only 9.5 to 1 compression. It's smaller than the 6.4. You would have to put a 6.4 intake manifold on it to really get a good comparison. The 6.2, if you were to use the same cam for both engines, would make power later in the RPM range, but it would be less than, like significantly less than. And matter of fact, the 5.7 would out torque it through the mid range easily. So yeah, it's funny when you do the math on it, it's really not that much power naturally aspirated. Duke saying the sibling rivalry seems like good marketing, always worth buying the next step up. With Ford and Chevy, the base V8 is always the best option. Yep. The Goldilocks setup, yes. Not it. So I'm saying, and then the modern 6.4 produces more horsepower than the OG 426. Fun fact, the OG 426 was actually rated at 390 net horsepower. It's pretty funny. The 426 had a lot of different horsepower ratings. I'll tell you what, let me put it to you like this. The cylinder heads on a 5.7 flow about almost 10% more than the cylinder heads on the OG 425 horse 426 Hemi. Sovereigns, is the LS, it's an OHV. It's just a pushrod engine. It is not dual overhead cam. Duke's asking, how would you build around a 391 gear then? Bigger cam install, or still recommend the mild cam and stock converter? It all depends on what you're doing with that car. So with a 391 though, presumably, yeah, you're going to go with bigger cam, more stall converter. You want that thing to rev now. So that might end up being a different intake manifold. You may go with the an extrude hone 6.1, or if you're really getting crazy, one of the short ram Hollies. At that point, it all depends on what you're going to be up to with that car, because it, although works well with a Nag 1 car, that gear is not going to be the most fun to just drive around in general. It'll be fun around town, but it'll be a little bit annoying on the highway. Raj is asking, is the 180 thermostat mod good on a good mod on the 2019 plus Rams? Listen, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't necessarily do it. The reason why is you're not going to see a lot of gain with that. I didn't see a lot when I did it on Stormy. And to be perfectly honest, I still have the stock thermostat in Buffy, and that truck is over 200,000 miles and it runs like a champ. So some guys will argue, I even think I argued this, that it is a good idea though to run the cooler thermostat if for no other reason than it'll also keep your oil temps down, which helps to bolster oil pressure a little bit at idle. But you're going to have to render your shutters inoperative, so you got to disable those, and you'll have to be able to adjust for your fan settings in the tune, and also be able to turn off your disabled shutter codes. So you'll still have that to have to deal with. Sovereign, interesting. Sovereign 390 like the 440. The 440 was actually rated at 375, which was very optimistic for the 440. I want to say the 440 was rated more like 290 or 310. Something along those lines when they did the net ratings, but I can't remember. I do remember the very vividly the net rating for the 426. Do saying interesting. Just looking for a fun setup around town. Man, if it's my car, dude, if you want to re-gear it, go with the set of 370s, just so that you've got a little bit longer legs on the freeway. And the 390 gears are going to get real annoying. The first gear is going to be useless. And I don't mean like it's just you're going to hit the throttle and it's going to light the tires up. You're just never going to see first gear unless you're just barely pulling away. You know, it'll go first gear, second gear. It's going to immediately shift. Plus, you're going to want to tune the transmission to be able to accommodate the gears too. So that's going to be a big part of what you'll be working with. So I'm saying 375. Wow, like the 345. Yep. Yes, sir. So, yeah, the early Hemis. Early Hemis. I actually have a book. The Commando 426 hemispherical racing engine. That is not the street Hemi. And this is where a lot of guys really get it wrong when they start talking about Hemis. In 1964, when that engine was released in the Polara as a factory drag race engine, that engine is not the same as the street Hemi. There's an intake manifold difference. There's a camshaft style. The street Hemi was a hydraulic flat tappet versus a solid roller. The compression ratio was nowhere near the same. This is where things get weird for the Hemi. So talk about knowing your limitations. The Hemi, oh my gosh. Okay, so the street Hemi had a 10.5 to 1 compression ratio. Sound familiar? 5.7 guys? The race Hemi had a 12.5 to 1 compression ratio. The problem with the Hemi, though, having such a low compression ratio is that it was kind of a turd down low. Like up until like 4,000 RPM, that engine was lazy. I mean, real lazy. Now, again, remember that the Hemi was there before the Mark IV big block, right, from Chevrolet. The Mark IV big block, which would be your 427, 454 family, those engines, the 427 especially, was hatched specifically to dethrone the Hemi in terms of outright horsepower. It's a Hemi, it's a canted valve scenario. It's not altogether different than what the Hemi is. A canted valve, Hemi, they're cousins. It's just that Chevrolet mass produced theirs and Dodge chose not to. Anyway, the point that I'm getting to is the 440 was far more street friendly than the Hemi. And matter of fact, if you lived up north, the Hemi was practically undrivable during the wintertime. Raj is asking, have you seen any of the new Hurricane engines being modded, and what do you think about its capabilities and performance aspects? So, not really. Yeah, the aftermarket side, like HP Tuners, Diablo, they don't have that operating system cracked yet. So in the wild, no. Although you can modify them if you buy, well, and this would kind of be a no-brainer, but you can modify them if you buy the crate motor. And that is something that, you know, some folks have fooled around with, other folks haven't. But I haven't heard of anybody hitting the dyno and dropping sick numbers with this engine. I've looked, but I didn't really exhaust any efforts to try to, you know, try to dig up as much dirt as I could on it. Mainly because it's not commercially available software. And since nobody is really engine swapping per se, you know, they're challengers into that engine family, it's like you're just not seeing it, you know. I would like to see folks start to do something with that engine though. But here's the twist. Nobody's even fooling around with like piggyback systems or anything like that, and you would have seen that for the Wagoneer. And you're not seeing it, presumably because people are scared to death of it. And they're scared to death of it because of it's just, they're using a boatload of boost to get that engine to the numbers that they're at. So I don't think anybody wants to be the first one to split a block in half, but we'll see. Sauer's asking, speaking of Chevy, was the 5.7 Chevy 350 not a good engine to mod? It was the best engine to mod. People, that's what most people got their start with, and there are more for, okay, so the engine that it still to this day sells the most modification parts are the SBC Chevrolets. By like an order of magnitude, people will modify, they'll make more 383s and hot than pretty much anything else out there, believe it or not. The 350 is a hell of an engine. 454 is badass. And again, it's basically just a canted valve engine. Did the Chevy 350 ever have a legend? Oh, it is the legend. I mean, there's nothing bigger than the Chevy 350 when it comes to hot rod status. The Chevy 350 has been in every performance variant. There have been hot rodded variants from Chevrolet for the 350. The LT1 is one of the first ones that comes to mind. I mean, that's a legendary 350. Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, a different set of cylinder heads and an intake manifold, and you're literally off to the races with that thing. But that's the basis people would build to this day, build 383. In fact, it's funny you should ask. So a lot of folks will say the 383 instead of the 350. A lot of guys will, to this day, swear by an SBC 383 over an LS platform engine for older engine builds. I don't know how much I agree with it, but there's guys that will do that. DM427 is ripping awesome. But yeah, no, 350's got, yeah. And like Duke was saying, before the LS, the 350 was the go-to cheap junkyard hot rod. I mean, it didn't matter if you're circle track racing, building a pickup truck, if you were building a drag racer, street strip hot rod. I mean, Dude, yeah, you can't go wrong with a 350. Boats and everything else. I mean, they're all amazing. Um, just with the diversity of what you could do with that engine. I mean, it would work as, I mean, you would see them in industrial applications. You would see them in agricultural applications. You would see those things in, again, pickup trucks, hot rods, race cars, everything. In fact, for the longest time, everybody that built a 30 style hot rod, it was Ford body, Ford chassis, Chevy powertrain, Ford rear end. I mean, that's just how they do. Dude, yeah, I've seen lawnmowers powered by 350s. I mean, guys would put 350s in tractors. Guys would, I mean, and the list just goes on and on. So, yeah, golly, man, talk about that. I don't know that there will ever be another engine that will have just the career that the Chevy 350. I mean, the LS and LT stuff, yeah, but you got to remember that the 350 in all of its forms, even when it was only making like 140 horsepower all the way up until, it was discontinued. It was all nuts. Oh, Sovereign's talking to Duke about a 350 and a love truck. So back in the day, S10 pickups, Vegas, Monzas, dude, you would see guys. This is like before the LS swap, there was the small block swap for those types of pickup trucks. And you would see 350 V8s in S10 Blazers, lowered. And these things would rip, man. I mean, they were fast. They were all like, mid to low 13-second cars, which is fast. Don't let anybody fool you. A mid to low 13-second vehicle is a shitting and a getting type of ride. So, yeah, I mean, there's you can't argue that. I mean, it's a fast, fun vehicle. But yeah, small blocks and small cars, man. I mean, that's some ripping stuff. So, hey, you got to remember, I mean, Carroll Shelby, when he was first looking to build Cobras, went to Chevrolet first. Oh, Duke, there's a dude in your area. Yeah, it seems like everybody had a dude that would do that, and they were great at it. And it was fairly easy. By the time it was all said and done, it was radiator, motor mounts, and an exhaust system that would fit in the confines of that thing. And yeah, hard ride. No, they are easy to work on. You do not need any kind of degree to work on those things. But yeah, it's crazy. The just the stuff that was around back in the, and that's the other thing too, guys, talking about knowing your limitations, getting back to the theme of the show. One of the things I try to caution guys on is, when you start getting into modifying cars, remember where you came from also. One of the things that I see, there's a lot of toxicity in the car world. There a shitload, and one of the things I got to tell you is be really happy with what you've got now. It is far and away faster than stuff that was just out 10 or 15 years ago. And that is very recent in a lot of people's memories. Make sure that you're having fun. Do not limit yourself to a certain power level. Do not limit yourself to a certain status. Or in other words, don't try to aspire to so much that you forget where you're coming from. Like the 350 in an S10 pickup truck. Story for another time, but I have been like kind of looking at old school S10 pickup trucks lately. Not that I really want one, but I kind of do. I also kind of want an old school boxy Ranger. killer swap with a 302, by the way. That's actually a little bit better. Anyway, depending on, doesn't matter. But it's stuff like that, the fun. Make sure you're having fun with it. Because if you're having fun with it, then you'll play with it. And if you're playing with it regularly, you'll get good at, that's how you develop a skill set. You don't learn through, just harsh, dogmatic type of stodgery. You learn through play. You learn through having fun. You learn through goofing around. And if you've got a smile on your face, you'll learn. Did you know that? If you're smiling, you'll learn faster. It's weird. Try it out. If you're trying to figure something out, don't mad face it. Just kind of smile, man. Just go, well, okay, let's figure this out. It'll be fun. It'll blow your mind how much faster you'll pick up on stuff. And how much easier you can handle situations, right? So just put a smile on your face. Have fun with what you got. Don't try to have the biggest and baddest and the fastest and all this other stuff, because, guys, I can tell you this through a lot of experience and a lot of expense. The worst limitation you can hit is that financial limitation where you just go, look, I can't afford to have what I want. And then you get frustrated. Don't be that guy. Want what you have, enjoy what you have a blast with it, and enjoy watching other folks blast, their money right out of their savings accounts. But with that, guys, we are now over 2 whole ass hours. We haven't done a 2-hour show in a long time, man. Thanks, guys, for hanging out with us tonight. Big shout out to Noab and Nitro crew. Thank y'all so much. Bob Smith and Stuart, thank you guys so much for the contributions to the cause. I truly, truly appreciate it, guys. You have no idea how much it means to me when you guys do that. I know it's a sacrifice. We're all broke. And when you guys contribute, I mean, it means the world to me. I know what it takes to earn a buck, and to keep a buck is even tougher. So I do truly appreciate that, guys. But with that, guys, I do have to wrap it up. Listen, love each and every one of you guys. Would not do this without you guys. Don't forget to get out there and do something cool for somebody. Chances are they need it way more than you know. And with that, now it's a wrap. Y'all have a great one. Adios.